before we start, if I prefer these kinds of things to be more like a conversation instead of me just like totally rambling. So, any question whatsoever, throw it in the comments. Like, it's not too big, it's not too little. I'll tackle anything. There's nothing that's really off limits. So, any type question, we'll tackle it. Feel free to introduce yourself in the comments section on the right, and we can all be friends. So let's officially kick it off. So, hello everyone. I'm Josh Pigford, founder of Baremetrics. We do subscription analytics, insights, lots of tools to help you make more money. And I've been doing the Baremetrics bit since late 2013. Prior to that, I was building software and startups for, I don't know, nearly a decade. So today we're going to talk about business, and all the stuff that's associated with that. So we can talk about culture, making money, pricing, remote work. All of Baremetrics is remote. We don't have a central office anywhere. Talk about transparency, making your numbers public, not public, the pros and cons of that, hiring, salary stuff, insurance. I mean, all the bits and pieces of building a company. We should talk about it. So there's the questions and topics area below where it says ask a question or suggest a topic. You should ask a question or suggest a topic, and I'll tackle them. And I think that's it. So looks like we got about 10 questions to get things started. And again, as you think of anything, throw it there in the question section, and I'll tackle it. This, I'm assuming, will take, I don't know, maybe a third or fourth one that we've done, and they typically last under an hour. I don't know, 30, 45 minutes. So I'm assuming this will be about that as well. So let's get the ball rolling. So this first question here, this first question is from Chris. Says, how do you build culture throughout a remote work organization? So culture is one of these things that when we were a team of, two or one when it was just me, I mean, this culture is one of those things like it's sort of irrelevant, or at least it's not something that you would actively be pursuing. But as we've gotten a little bit bigger, so we're about 8 people now, it's something that I spend more time thinking about, but not in the specific, like, our culture's at a 6 and we should bring our culture up to an 8. How can I make that improvement? It's not like something that we graph anywhere or something on some secret internal Baremetrics dashboard. Instead, what I feel like it's been more of is, to me, like, culture is this like outpouring of initially like founder personality kind of stuff and founder like leanings, and then it becomes like it's ultimately the sum of the parts, right? So so that really comes down to hiring. So that's where it becomes something to keep in mind with like the type of people that you hire. I think that like the culture that exists in an office, a physical office space, is unquestionably different from a remote space or a remote setup where no one, ever really sees each other face to face, except for like if you have like a retreat or something like that. But you do video chats on a regular basis, that kind of thing. But I think like building culture comes down to being really intentional with the things that are important to your company. So I think for us, not overworking is really important. And I think that's something that we struggle with. I mean, we still struggle with that for sure, but not having this, this expectation that, you should either always have to be online or always, respond to things instantly. Like, and we've been trying, especially in the past couple months, to try to like loosen that up and be a lot more asynchronous, so that we're not, or at least less asynchronous. Is that the right? I always get asynchronous. It's like opacity. I get those mixed up. Either way, we're trying to remove the emphasis on, like, and Slack is really bad about this, like putting this false expectation that you should, if you put something in a chat, then I should get an instant response soon, right? And that's not healthy. So that would be bad for company culture, especially in a remote work environment. So establishing and learning and being aware of the things that are driving what the expectations are and kind of like how people feel about the company that they're working for. I think being aware of those goes a long way towards building something that you want. I don't think that like anybody can say, hey, here's like the prime example of like the epitome of good company culture, because this is different. It's like saying that like this is the prime example of like a good human being. Every single person on earth should try to be like this human being. Like every company is different, right? And there's pros and cons, and like I said, it's the sum of the parts, and it's the sum of like lots of little decisions along the way. I remember when we were like, it was years ago when we had our first kid, somebody telling us that like it's not that any single one parenting decision is not going to like make or break your kid. I mean, I guess there are certain ones that would certainly be detrimental, but for the most part, you can't just do a single thing that will forever totally ruin your child. Your child is the sum of your decisions and actions and responses over years. And a building company is the same way. And the culture is ultimately like an outpouring of that. So I think that tackles that. I'm happy to talk more about culture and stuff too. Next question is from Bethany, who says, how do you get all of the images for your blog posts? So I found a guy. I've got a guy, which Sean here in the comments says they have a guy. We do have a guy. But the guy started out as me finding stock illustrations of his on iStock that I really liked. And I mean, the first probably, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 articles that I used his illustrations were just ones I found on iStock and bought them. But then I started, because they kind of would fit. I could make things like sort of, like if I squint really hard, this image this will fit with the topic of this article. Eventually I started running out of those. I was having a hard time finding options that would fit for the topic. So I reached out to him and said, hey man, how much would it cost to just get you to do a custom one every time we have a new article? So that's what I did. We've been doing that for, I don't know, the past maybe a year. I don't think it's been that long. It may have been a year. Probably has been a year. So what typically happens if I'm being a decent human being, and I've done really well at planning out the next article, I'll try to hit him up like a week before and say, hey man, here's the topic. Here's when I need it by. And he'll say, cool. I mean, we rarely even have back and forth. He'll sometimes send me like a sketch, but usually just by the time I say I need it, he sends me a finished piece, and it's amazing. Sometimes when I'm not being a very good human being, it'll be like, hey man, I need this tomorrow. Can you do that? And he still amazingly says, yep. And I mean, I pay a little bit extra for that because of my poor planning. But yes, I found a guy. And I think, so to maybe turn this into something useful, use something like iStock as a starting point, like find somebody, some artist there who's got a ton of stuff that they've posted. You love their style, and maybe try to use a few for a few articles. And then as you go, like reach out to them and say, hey, could we get some custom stuff done, and see how much it costs. And maybe it costs prohibitive, but yeah, I've loved it. And like people consistently say that's like, they know that Baremetrics article by that style. So that's great. Next question from Sean. Do you think being based on the Stripe API limits Baremetrics potential? Yes, I do think so. I'm going to leave it at that for now. Yes, it does limit us. Am I worried about it? at this point? No, for reasons that I won't say at the moment. Okay. I'm going to skip Kevin's question as a topic. No, I will still tackle it, but I'll tackle it later, and try to hit up some of these specific questions first. Let's see. Oh, okay. Back to Sean, and I can expand on your question here a little bit more. He says, at this point, with 2-ish or so years of development, Baremetrics is pretty comprehensive application with some really great functionality. Do you think that with the same amount of time and effort, another piece of software that wasn't limited to the Stripe API, such as an accounting tool, management tool, et cetera, you would have a bigger annual run rate? So yes, but because the question is, would I do anything different? Which also, yes. But I think where we're at now, it's not something that I would like. I think we are doing things to address that. And it will be a non-issue on all levels in the next, I don't know, 2 to 6 months or something. So but I guess to tackle the Stripe API specific thing, do I think that's a bad thing? No. I mean, it's the same sort of like, should you build software for like small businesses? I mean, sure, if you want to, but it all kind of comes down to like, what are you trying to build, or what kind of customers are you trying to build stuff for? Because I think like certain types of customers, like depending on what industry you get into, that changes who you will sort of interface with. And like, do you want to build stuff for, say, bands? Okay, like that's a very different customer than like the Microsofts and Apples of the world. Like those are different types of customers to sell to. So, and you'll make different types of money, but that's not a bad thing. It's just, what are you wanting to do with business? So I still think I would start off on the same way. Certainly it benefited us in a lot of ways past just, having that kind of focus and not having to try to support half a dozen different payment processors out of the gate was beneficial, and like formed some partnerships that otherwise would not have been possible. So I don't know that I would do anything different on the outset, beginning, the start, but we're doing things to address the sort of limitations of SaaS companies on Stripe at the moment. James asks, when are we getting live or at least near real-time metrics? Man, we talk about this in our Slack chat room, maybe daily. I don't know. It depends. And we've kind of like beta tested a few things. I think we actually have a little flag that we could actually turn on live metrics for your account. It's finicky. So it just depends on, there's a lot of different factors there, and it's a technical thing of background jobs, and like we're storing massive amounts of data, and like one little change can trickle back and affect like thousands, if not millions, of like instances of certain metrics, and it's kind of a beast. So it's on the roadmap to absolutely have it. Perfect world, absolutely live. Probably initially it'll be more like a 3 to 6 hour delay. But it's certainly something we think about often. All right, let's see. So Vlad asks or says, curious to find out more about your bootstrapping period. So let's talk about bootstrapping. Yes. And where Baremetrics falls into that. So for the past 10 years of building stuff, I've always done things, largely bootstrapped, or, built one thing and used some of the money from that to build the next thing. Baremetrics started out that way. So, for the first almost year, totally bootstrapped. Really was running off of its own revenue, which is great. So then we raised $500,000 of seed money from General Catalyst. That was in 2014. And then we announced that as part of this whole like Stripe fund thing. And we didn't announce this, was back in December, raised $300,000 more. So in total, we've raised $800,000 of seed stage funding. And that's kind of where we're at the moment. Yeah. So I think we can talk about some of the like raising funds kind of thing for sure, though I'm not certainly not like a pro on that. I just know of what we've done. The bootstrapping thing I think is super valuable early on for probably 99% of companies that start stuff. There's edge cases of like hardware startups and people like in like doing health stuff and like certain things with this lots of regulation require a ton of money, whatever. I get that. But for most people talking like a typical tech startup, there is nearly no reason whatsoever for them not to bootstrap on some level to start off with, if only because it makes you prove that there is something there to charge for. Because I mean, like it's graveyards are lined with startups who didn't have a fat clue how they were going to make any money. They just didn't know. Like, sure, this sounds like a cool idea. Let me just build some software for it, and then we'll see if later on we'll figure out how to make money from it. And that's a terrible idea, and you'll fail because you've been building things without getting feedback from the correct people. That's an important part of bootstrapping, is that you are you're figuring out how to make money from the people who are willing to give you money, instead of getting feedback from people who have no intention of ever giving you any money. So that's sort of the important part of bootstrapping early on, is figuring out who your actual customers are, the kind of customers who will sustain and help you build a business. Sip of coffee. Okay, well, we'll answer Vlad's next question here, which was, how hard is it to convince investors to put money in a remote team? I don't know. I mean, we've convinced 2 separate investors to give us a total of $800,000 in our remote team. And certainly one of those investors has invested in lots of remote teams. So, I mean, it's probably harder to, it's not that investors are just completely opposed to remote teams. It's that your location in proximity to the investors is what probably makes it harder. So I'm in Birmingham, Alabama. There's not really much here in terms of raising investor activity here, at least as far as tech startups go. So had I been, say, in San Francisco or even like New York, or I don't know, any one of like a dozen startup hubs, and our team, the rest of our team was remote, it likely would have been much easier to raise some money for our remote team, just because it's just easier to raise money when you can like have a meeting in person and go grab coffee with somebody, or doing the Skype thing. I mean, that's how we did it. But it just, even one of our investors though actually flew and we met up down here. So like there was still this important part of having a human connection, especially when you're talking about 6-figure plus amounts of money. So I think it's less about the team as a whole being remote and more about your proximity to money, because that's sort of really kind of what it comes down to. Jason asks, I know you like to automate. How do you automate your marketing, if at all? So we don't have a really great marketing automation bit in place. So there's some things like using Buffer to like queue up stuff to share, like sharing our content regularly. We actually use Buffer. We actually use Edgar more for the like reposting stuff over lengthy periods of time. They have this like content library kind of thing that's super great for that. So that's about the extent of it. So back in late December, I actually hired, we call it like a remote office administrator position. And she has been fantastic to tackle some of the stuff that like, it's like quasi automation stuff. Like it's repetitive stuff, but that there's not necessarily a great software solution for it. So I sort of started automating things in that sense when it comes to marketing. But we have a lot more We have a lot more to do that we could do in that. We started talking yesterday about like the content stuff, like automating that in a better fashion, or at least coming up with a process. I think a lot of times I think automation in itself might be a little overrated or sometimes not feasible, but having a process, being able to processize, I don't think that's a word, but I just made it a word, processize something is in and of itself super valuable, because then you can get someone to run that process over and over again for less than it would cost to like build a bunch of software to turn that process into some sort of automated solution. So I don't know. I hope that answers your question. All right. Sip. All right. This question just came in from Wes. Does Baremetrics operate on an open salary model like Buffer's open salary, or have you kicked it around? So no, our internal salaries are not public or open to the team as a whole. To my knowledge, I don't know of anybody that knows everybody's salary other than me. It hasn't been brought up. I don't know. We use, Buffer's salary formula thing, at least a couple of iterations back, is at least a basis for how we come up with salaries. We don't use the exact same numbers or percentages or anything like that. But the idea of having like those sort of buckets that influence a final number, instead of it just being this either 100% gut, like, man, I'd pay X dollars for this person, and like that's that, or that it also helps prevent it from being this super annoying sort of negotiation phase where like everybody's just back and forth, like I'm worth this, and it's like I don't know what you are, and like I think negotiating there's some of that, and I'm certainly fine with it on my end, but I think it can be an uncomfortable thing and easier to just say, hey, here's our formula. I can show you the formula that we use to arrive at your number, and then here are the things that can be affected to change that number. Maybe we'll do an open salary thing, but literally no one in the company has ever asked about it, or we just haven't had issues with the salary stuff at this point. So, James asks, talk about Baremetrics' near-term roadmap. Okay, let me think here. I don't want to. I'm slightly hesitant on the roadmap stuff. I don't want to say it's off limits. It's not off limits. There's a lot of stuff on the roadmap. I'll say that. And there's a lot around helping you answer questions. I'll say that. Sorry, I can't be more open with the specific plans of our software. Maybe one day. Okay. Let's see. Stephen O'Grady asks, did you have any apprehensions bringing a Canadian onto your team? Yes. Canadians, they're sneaky. They are very mischievous, and they can't be trusted. Yeah. Lots of apprehensions. So many. All right. Hey, Kagan. Okay. Vlad asks, as far as I know, you're a sole founder. Can you talk about this thing as well? Yeah. So sole founders. Would I do that? I am the sole founder of Baremetrics for the first, 6-ish months. It was just me. Doing 100% of the work. So, talking like design, development, like front end and back end, support, any kind of marketing, like the whole bit. And that was a lot. That was arguably too much to tackle. So the question is it possible, or is it a good idea to be a sole founder? Would I do it again? I don't know that I would. It wasn't like though that I had a bunch of people that I was like, yeah, me and this guy had this idea and we should start a company. But then I was like, no, I'm gonna be a sole founder, get out of my space. Right. No. So it wasn't like that. It was just, I just had the idea. And And so I built it, and then it kind of went from there. But I think in hindsight, I wish I had spent a little more time up front on that and maybe thrown around the idea with some other people and potentially gone like the co-founder route. Like there are a lot of days that I wish there was somebody else to to help sort of balance things a bit, because it's lonely being a sole founder. And when we're still we're super open company, but there's still, at the end of the day, it comes down to sort of me and my decisions. And so having somebody else to sort of bear the weight of that decisions of those decisions, and to balance out when it's like, man, I'm having a tough day, or like this stuff, things just aren't adding up, or that kind of stuff. It'd be nice to have somebody else to sort of balance out those things and like be a sounding board, and also have like a lot of sort of skin in the game. So, not impossible. I think next time around to put more thought into it though. And, or next time, down the road, whatever, I probably would try to have a co-founder or two next time around. Let's see. James asks, can you talk more about how your pricing plans have changed over the years, and some stats around how that lifetime discount offer performs? Okay, so there's two different bits there. So pricing, when we started out in 2013, I just launched with like 4 plans. Super vanilla SaaS setup. Like here are 4 plans ranging from like, I don't know, $29 up to like $249, I think was what the deal was. And there was no trial. There was no free plan. You paid for it up front. We had a 60-day money back guarantee. But it is what it was. I mean, it's so straightforward. It was based on customer counts. So, say you got 100 customers, then you would be, or up to 100 customers, like $29. And then as you got up to like 5,000 customers, that went on up, whatever. And that setup existed with small adjustments, but nothing major, for up until about, I don't know, 6 months ago. And so, I mean, that was what it was. Then we tested adding a free plan. So just flat out, here's a free plan. You get access to all the metrics, but no historical data, and some of the major features were non-existent. I think, I don't know, 7 or 8 weeks later, we killed that off. We wrote a whole article about that. I think it was something about like how freemium almost killed our business or something like that. So we didn't set that up. Well, one, we didn't account for the influx of people who would want to use that, which was good. There was a ton of people that signed up, but bad because there was a ton of data from those companies that we had to process, and then weren't able to handle the support load and the infrastructure load that caused. And so we backed off on that, and then moved to a trial. So then we switched that to a 14-day trial. Still no credit card at that point. So no credit card up front to try it out for 14 days. And then you either had to pick a plan, or we stopped calculating and storing all your data. So that existed until maybe December. And then what we switched to was MRR-based pricing. So the problem was with the customer base was the difference between B2B and B2C. So you think of like a B2B, say they've got an average revenue, the average monthly amount that they're making per customer might be, on a base level, $70 to $100 a month. Great, fine. On the B2C, so per customer, and that's basically what you're paying for on the monthly. When you're, as far as the monthly plan goes, you are paying per customer, pennies per customer, basically. So the problem happened when you got like a B2C company who might be charging, say, $25 a year. So when we're talking like $1 or $2 a month for a customer, they could have 100,000 customers that they're making $1 a month from, which, I mean, $100,000 a month, great. But when you're like, say you've got like 10,000 customers, that you're charging $1 a month. Okay, so that's $10,000 a month, and that's less cool. And you're having to pay a major premium for Baremetrics because we're based on the customer count and not on the revenue count. So we said, let's shift that, base it on revenue, which is a much more sort of consistent thing across the board. Like, $20,000 a month is more or less the same for a company. That's about as standard as we can get for like some sort of limiting factor to gauge like the size of the company. Sure, talk about overhead and expenses are different between those different types of company, but that's not necessarily our problem. So we switched, and we used to get complaints all the time about the pricing doesn't make sense for us. Like it costs too much because we have tons of customers, but we're not making that much money. So now those issues are basically sort of non-existent. 100% happy with the move to revenue-based pricing. And that's where we're at now, is revenue-based pricing based on basically how much revenue you're making. And there's some feature gating in between that too. So things like dunning are only available on the $250 a month and up plans. We also used to do like plans that ended in a 9, like 149, 29, 249, 79, that kind of stuff. And then now it's mostly even. So like $50, $100, $250, $500. I don't know that there's any like tangible difference between those, but the 9s always bothered me. So maybe it's an OCD thing. And then lifetime discount thing. So we started testing this thing somewhere along those pricing changes, where in your 14-day trial, there's a banner at the top that says, when you sign up, says like, hey, thanks for trying us out. If you sign up today, this is on day 1, here's a 14% off discount for life. So you sign up that day, first day, you get 14% off for the life of your account. Okay, cool. Everybody's like, cool, all right. The next day, though, you log in, and it's 13%. And at this point, you realize this coupon is decreasing. I'm now saving less money by waiting. So, you get down to, say, 7 or 8 days, it's like 7 or 8%. And then when there are, I think it's 5 days left, it says something like, you've got like 5, we'll give you 5 off discount for life, but tomorrow the discount goes away. I forget what the wording is. But we at that point removed the discount completely. And that has worked really well on getting people to upgrade earlier on in the trial process. I don't know that it convinces anybody or that many people to upgrade or to become a full paying customer that otherwise would not have, but I think it gets them earlier. It might, but I think it gets them into the process a lot earlier to become a paying customer and to start receiving value out of it earlier on than waiting a full 2 weeks and potentially like letting it go and not worrying about upgrading at all or becoming a paying customer. We've been talking, it's a hard thing to A/B test on our end as far as like, should we even offer the discount at all? But it's on the roadmap to test that. Okay, let's see here. Vlad asks, what's the algorithm to calculate lifetime value? So we try to keep these things super simple on a high level. So like LTV on its own is the average monthly revenue per customer divided by the user churn rate. So it's basically how long will people be paying that monthly rate before they cancel? That's essentially what that says. There's a ton of stuff that goes into the decision of like how much they're actually paying per month. So things like coupons affect that a lot. And then also when user churn is, when that occurs. So there's lots of different factors and edge cases that play into, has this person churned or not? Think of like a failed payment, and maybe they've failed 3 or 4 times, but they haven't, like they end up coming back. Like how does user churn fall into that? So it's less about the algorithm itself and more about handling all the edge cases and shoving that into the formula correctly. Circling back around, James asks if it only makes this is about the coupon thing. If it makes them sign up earlier, then is it worth it for you? Yes, because the sooner we can get somebody actively using Baremetrics and wanting to get their team in there and like getting everybody on board, the better. Because like the longer they wait in the trial, the less likely they are to convert. So that's the main purpose, is like we want them to start using it fully and to commit as a company to using it as soon as possible, as fast as possible after they sign up, because they're more likely to stick around longer. Felix asks, can you tell us why it went so silent on the blog lately? And I like your beer. Thank you. So the blog thing has been, I think I felt, I would say in the past like year, I've had like a pretty strong case of imposter syndrome. So basically like feeling like I don't really have a clue what I'm doing. Like there's no reason for me to like, I couldn't like reproduce anything that we've done this far on purpose. Like I felt like I've lucked my way into it to some extent. So on a lot of levels, I haven't felt like I have anything great to say as far as like writing stuff, which is, if I'm being honest, is probably false. But when it comes to like sitting down and saying, hey, let me write about something, the 100 items that exist in our like blog idea Trello board, any of those that I look at, I'm just sort of like writer's block. Like I just haven't felt up for it. So I will say that's changing. So like I have felt a lot better about getting back into the writing the content stuff again. So, but I mean, the past, I don't know, 3 or 4 articles we've had like some guest posts, and Kagan, our customer success guy, has been writing some great stuff too. So I think there's a lot of pressure up front for me to like produce some big article every week, and it kind of got me burnt out. So, but I'm getting back into the swing of that. So I think next week, the article I have next week is common mistakes that founders make, or something along those lines. So things that people do, that founders do, that are common and that they should not do them anymore. That kind of stuff. Either way, that's that. So we got 4 more things to tackle here. Be sure 05. It definitely asks some more questions, and I'll still tackle them. Brian asks, what was your strategy in raising prices, and how did your customers react? So when we so it wasn't so much that we raised prices as much as we changed prices. And we didn't change, we grandfathered all past customers. So those customers that were on their price on that plan stayed on that plan. Some features only became available if you change over to the new pricing plan, but it's sort of a edge case. But ideally, yeah, I mean, it goes back to the whole revenue-based pricing thing. Like, I think the new pricing is not so much a raising price as much as it is a better alignment with the value you sort of perceive or will possibly get from it. So there was really almost zero pushback. I think we had like one person who was on the old pricing, and then he had a separate business. He was signing up for a second one. And when he signed up for that, he was like, whoa, this pricing is way different. And he would have come out on the bad end. And I think we ended up just giving him a coupon for like 50% off or something. So in general, customers' reaction has been 99% positive. Yeah, definitely a good thing. Sean asks, you were solely responsible for an application that had quite a lot of users and pretty significant MRR at the start. To me, that is scary from a technical point of view. You have 10 plus years of professional development, more than me, but did you ever feel out of your depth or scared during your solo phase when Baremetrics was growing? Yes. Holy crap. I mean, I still feel out of my depth and scared a lot of days. So the first Baremetrics hire, who's Ben, so he's still at Baremetrics. Him coming on board actually started out of a fire I was trying to put out. I mean, just hitting a wall, like everything, like metrics weren't updating. I was like, things were really slow. I was spending like $7,000 or $8,000 a month on Heroku to like to try to beef up like the speed of the background workers. Like it was in a bad spot. And I posted something on Twitter, and Ben responded on Twitter saying like, hey, how can I help? And so he started freelancing initially, just being a contractor, helping resolve stuff. And then a couple months later came on board, was the first full-time hire. So yeah. Oh man, it was scary. And like I said, I built a ton of stuff in the past, but like this was not a thing I had built before. Like processing, hundreds of thousands, millions of records at a time, and needing to show data across these different graphs. And it was just, man, it was a nightmare. And yeah, so like, what's the takeaway there? Like find people to help early on. Don't hesitate on outsourcing stuff. Like I waited too long to bring Ben on board, or to find someone early on to help out with that stuff. But at the same time, don't over optimize and like solve for problems you don't have. That also, it would have been a mistake so Baremetrics launched, I built the first version over the course of about, as far as man hours go, like 7 or 8 days. And if I had like said, okay, I'm going to build the software for 10,000 paying customers, I can handle, terabytes of data. This is not a big deal. Like we can address this from day one. Like we still would not have launched because you would have made the incorrect assumptions. And I can talk about, like launching all day long, and building stuff and how much you should build and all that stuff. Either way, separate topic. So get some help early on if you can, but get help for solving like actual problems you have on hand. Don't like assume you're going to have a big problem, but try to take action sooner than later. Like don't totally just delay it and be in denial. Okay, so that's action. Okay. James asks, will we ever have the ability to build metrics we want based on all the data you already track? I don't know about like building your own metrics per se, like a formula, like saying X divided by Y multiplied by 3 or something like that as some odd KPI or something. I don't know about that, but there will be a way to pull your data into separate buckets based on certain other bits of data, if that makes any sense. You'll be able to like figure out and sort of segment your data into separate buckets, for sure. Vlad asks, what's the best acquisition channel for Baremetrics or for startups in this space? So still, for us, it's still content. Like that goes along. Even though we haven't been writing as much as we had before, that's still like a constant, consistent driver of new subscribers, people finding out, reading about something on the blog. But there's other things too, like building like little tools that are helpful for people. So we had like a forecasting tool that we launched, and that did really well and brought on a bunch of new customers. And we actually ended up wrapping that into Baremetrics product. There was like a build versus buy calculator thing. I think it's baremetrics.com/calculator that like it still gets a decent amount of traffic, but tons of traffic for the first few weeks after we launched it. Like building those little sort of cool little tools that people love to share goes a long way. But content, but like not content, just like don't just pump out junk. Just like having text on the screen isn't inherently valuable. But for us, content that appeals to our target audience, which happens to be other startups, goes a really long way. Okay, I'll tackle this. There's one more question, but if anybody else wants to throw in a few more questions, please do. And then while I'm answering this currently last question, I can then answer the next ones. All right. Kevin asks, he wants to talk about early stage SaaS growth. So we talk about growth early on. You have to do things that don't scale. Paul Graham talks about this, like doing things that don't scale. I think especially if you're like an engineer or have like sort of an engineer's brain, like you want to sort of methodically or programmatically solve things, you run the risk of doing things, like wasting your time doing things or automating things that don't need to be automated. And you end up, the problem is you end up making or automating or optimizing the wrong thing because you never figured out what exactly it is you're doing. So I think early on, like it's phone calls and emails out the wazoo, not necessarily cold calling, and not even necessarily cold emailing, but specifically talking to other human beings. Like you get some traction with like 10 customers or 10 people, 10 signups, like get on the phone with them and have conversation from one human being to the next, because you'll pick up things that otherwise you would have not gotten in an email. It's just super, super critical to have a conversation with people early on to figure out if what you're doing has any weight for them at all. The other side of that is I think charging early on is important. We can talk separately about free trials and free plans and freemium and all that junk, but I'm talking about like having something that you can ask another person to give you money for. If you can get that transaction to occur, if they will actually give you real dollars, then you start being able to get correct, positive, constructive feedback that's like worth something, literally worth money, right? Because if you start getting feedback from people who aren't giving you money, the context of their feedback is largely irrelevant. Maybe they would become a paying customer, but maybe they won't. Chances are they won't. Statistically speaking, they won't. So their feedback is mostly irrelevant. So early on, your growth will come tangentially through conversations with early customers and through trying to sell something, like actually doing some sales work and saying, here's the thing that I've got for sale. Do you want to buy it? Like, you just have to be a sales guy to some extent. I mean, maybe you're not like the best sales guy in all of startup land, but you have to ask people to pay you at some point, and getting over that hump. Like that's a hump that startups, just especially founders early on, never get over, is like the fear of asking for money and having people in droves tell you no. Like that's absolutely disturbingly frightening. Like you don't want anybody to tell you that. And so I think that's a big reason why startups don't ever ask for money and they end up failing, or they don't ask for it early enough because they're afraid somebody's gonna tell them, no, man, like the thing that you've spent the past 6, 12 months building isn't worth anything. And so you got to do that early on. You got to start charging for that so early. Like practical, like how do I get new customers stuff? I mean, that's like going and finding people who are, doing what you're doing, or like in an industry. Like, I mean, it could be, say you're targeting like pet stores with some like pet software or something. I don't know. That's like going to the pet store and asking them for money. For if they would be interested in using something like this and like pitching it to them. Patrick McKenzie, Patio 11, talks about when he was doing, what was that thing called? The calendar scheduling. Oh, geez. This one drives me crazy. Either way, he built this like appointment reminder. Thank you, Felix. So he went and like would go to, I don't know, like it was like a massage parlor, like a tanning salon or whatever, something like that, and said like, hey, can I pay you $50 to sit down with you for an hour or 30 minutes or whatever and talk to you about the problems your business is having and how I can potentially solve it. And so that's a great way to, at the very least, get some feedback on the kind of thing you should be building early on. And those can become customers for sure. Or at the very least, they'll tell you, no, that's not a problem I have, and you've avoided wasting your own time. So there's a lot of sort of hustle that has to happen early on, of just like, it's a slow road, and people typically aren't willing to put in the time it takes to like get a solid base of customers. Like Product Hunt isn't a basis for like launching something. It's a flash in the pan that, unless it's like a consumer product, it's not like, sure, it can have a little bump, but like that can't, if that's like your launch plan is to get on Product Hunt, then you're gonna have a long struggle with a lot of letdowns along the way. Yeah, if you have more specific questions about growth, let me know. Sean asked, will you continue to work on Baremetrics with 100% of your focus, or do you plan on getting it to run autonomously with your team so you can build something else? 100% on Baremetrics. Yeah, I'm not doing anything else. I mean, at least not in business. I like gardening and woodworking, and I've taken up like I got like an Arduino kit a couple weeks ago, and I love that junk. So, but I mean, as far as like business stuff, I have no intention of like, let me automate it and have the rest of my team do stuff while I go build something else. No, I'm 100% on Baremetrics. Felix asked if I'm going to do these regularly. And then I think there's two questions here. My intention this is like the fourth one that I've done. And my intention is always to do them regularly, but it usually ends up being like 3 or 4 months in between them. Yeah, I plan on it. I think I do want to have like more specific topics. So like maybe have one on just remote and try to get more questions ahead of time. Yeah. And then another question, most founders have some ideas flowing around in their head. Do you have some like this and like to share? I mean, I was actually just talking yesterday on Twitter about, what was that idea? So like we're having a retreat in a few weeks in Austin, Texas, and wanting to go play paintball as a team. And so we found a few paintball places, but so there was 2 that it came down to. One of them emailed us back and forth, like, great, answered the phone. The other one looked a lot cooler on their website, like all their different little courses or whatever looked legit, but their phone was dead and their emails bounced. And so then it was like, I bet these people don't even realize that this stuff doesn't work. So the idea that I had yesterday was that some business or some kind of way to automate like this infrastructure monitoring service. So like some way to like regularly call and make sure a phone number works, or regularly email and make sure that there's no like bounce backs, or that like a mailing address works, or like a mail forwarding service works, or that like data around like the location of a business on Google Maps or whatever is correct and up to date, or like there's all sorts of stuff that you can automate that I think a lot of businesses, they put into place and then don't even realize like it's all these things floating out in the ether, and they don't know if any of them are working as they sort of assume they would. So I always have random ideas, and I almost always post them on Twitter. There are very few things as far as business ideas go that like I haven't posted about, or that I'm like keeping like tucked away in my pocket. Because I think in and of themselves, business ideas are largely irrelevant because nobody ends up, executing on them. Either way. So Wes asks, coffee sip. We are now a team of 10. We are now a team of 10 plus. That's hard to say, Wes. And are looking to have our next retreat this fall. Do you typically rent a huge house for everyone or hotel it up to have everyone in their own rooms? Any location recommendations? So we're still at a size where, we just rent a big house. So the one in Austin that we're having in a couple of weeks is just a big house. And I think there are like 2 or 3 people that, either 2 or 4, that have to share a room, not share a bed, share a room. Important distinction there. That was the case last time too. We had one in Palm Springs, and there were a few people that had to share a room. And that hasn't been a big deal. I mean, I think 10 is starting to push it on finding a house big enough. At least it's not cost prohibitively expensive to have like a, 10 bedroom house. But right now we're still at a size where people aren't like totally annoyed by having to share a room. But I think they just soon get to a point where you have to have a hotel. But right now I like having everybody in the same house is super convenient. I think if you could find a place, like if it's got a couple of like small little, I don't know what to be like. It's almost like there's a few random little houses all, and there's like a courtyard in the middle or something. I don't know. I'm sure that exists somewhere. Location. So the big thing that we've had in the past, or has been an issue for us in the past, is picking like these cool places, at least like sunny, warm places with a really cool house, and then nothing to do. So like that was the case in Palm Springs. None of us were retired. None of us played golf. And so that meant that there was nothing to do outside of the house. So Austin, Texas has a lot more to do than Palm Springs did. So that's as far as locations go. Find some place where like there's stuff to do and go do stuff outside of the house. Any more questions? So post them quickly, very, very quickly. And I'll answer them. Otherwise, thanks everybody for joining in. And I think this will end up saving somewhere and can be watched later or something. But yeah, shoot me an email if you ever have any questions. So yeah, Kagan just posted, you can either shoot us an email. Yeah, we'll send some stickers to you for sure. We've even got some shirts and some mugs hanging around, I think. So yes, shoot us an email, hello@baremetrics.com. Shoot me an email directly, josh@baremetrics.com. And thanks for doing this and hanging out for an hour here. So I appreciate it. Yeah, hopefully I'll try to start doing this at least once a month, and we'll maybe do stuff around a topic. Either way, thanks everybody. That's all for now.